Welcome to the first guest on my channel, Mr. Dave Lee from Dave Lee on Investing. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's a complete honor. Thank you so much. I'm very much excited to speak with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to chat, to meet you, and to just dive into things.
Absolutely, absolutely. For those who don't know, Dave is somebody who contributed on Tesla Motors Club back from 2012, 2013 times. He spent a lot of time writing up these Tesla mega threads that initially got me into Tesla. And I just want to say that all the work that you did there, Dave, has been very instrumental in my Tesla journey. And of course, you always have to do your own research, and you're always very big in communicating that. But for me, I just want to say all the work you did changed my life. It really did. And I just want to say thank you so much. And I can tell you, at least from one person to another, your work made a huge difference. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Definitely appreciate that. And that was a fun time, actually. Early Tesla community, early Tesla investors,
Sure.
all just sharing, trying to figure out things. And it was much more unclear back then in terms of Tesla's potential and exactly what Tesla was as a company. But yeah, definitely fun times.
Absolutely. How much time did you spend on those mega threads? Because it looked like a full-time job. I mean, all the research you did. One of the conversations you had with Electrified, I think that was another podcast that you did. You dug into it a little bit, but I'm curious, like, how much time did that take to compile all that information?
Yeah, it basically was a full-time job
Sure.
for a few years because I think what happened was my wife and I, we ended up putting our life savings into Tesla in 2012 and 2013. And we had so much writing on it. I mean, on one hand, we would have been okay if our investment failed because we had our business, we had some real estate, et cetera. But everything else was in Tesla. And when it made its big jump in May 2013, it kind of went from, $6 now, post-split adjusted to, I don't know, it probably did a 6x within a few months. That's when things changed. I'm like, well, holy moly. It's
Right.
like, this is becoming a big chunk. And our retirement was pretty much set, even like, we were doing well off even before Tesla, but this made a big difference. I'm like, okay, I need to monitor this. I need to figure this out, whether or not like Tesla really has a runway past this and how confident, I am in that runway. And so I spent, a good, probably 2013, 14, 15, and 16, just diving into what I thought would be like the bull case for Tesla, like not just Model 3, because everyone knew about the Model 3.
Sure.
But my whole thesis was like, okay, if Tesla nails the Model 3, what happens next?
Sure.
Like where does that take Tesla? And I kind of concluded, I said, I think they're going to have a Gen 4 car after the Model 3. And this Gen 4 car is going to be the big one, the one that takes on the Corolla and the cheap economy cars and takes Tesla to the biggest, automaker in the world in the 2020s. And that helped me to kind of find conviction to kind of weather out the ups and downs, and
Sure.
And then what's funny is just this past couple of years after Tesla made its huge move in COVID and last year, I started to have kind of another sense of, I really need to dive into this. What's after Gen 4? What's after this $25,000 car? Does Tesla have something that takes Tesla way beyond $1 trillion, right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like another period of deep research and trying to, find more conviction.
Gotcha. On that Gen 4 car, so how obvious was that was going to be part of their plan early on? Was that something that what were the variables you were looking for that made that an obvious outcome? Like, I'm curious to see how you approach that.
Yeah, so it was interesting because when I started talking about the Gen 4 car, this is probably like in 2014 or so,
Sure.
People didn't completely believe the Gen 3 Model 3 car was, going to happen even.
Right.
People thought that was like, a pipe dream. But even the Tesla bulls at that time, it was hard for most to see beyond the Model 3. And I think part of it was a lot of people respected Toyota and the big players. And they're like, how can Tesla ever, compete with the Camry or Corolla? But for me, when I looked at it, I said, if Tesla makes the Model 3 successful, which I thought they had a really good chance because they just need to shrink the Model S and make it cheaper.
Yep.
If they did that and they actually fulfilled their goal of winning the BMW 3 Series market, kind of the entry-level compact sports sedan premium market, then what would happen would be they just need to do the same thing, but for a different, a lower end market, you know? They basically just need to make it cheaper and take on, you know, the Toyotas of this world. And I felt like nothing would stop them because they would have all of the momentum, they would have the cash flow, they would be profitable, and they would just need to make another great product, which they've already proven with the Model S, you know, that they can do it. So my whole thesis was, I'm pretty sure, 95 to 99% confident the Model 3 is going to be a success. And if it's a success, which I think it will be, I'm 95 to 99% that we'll have a Gen 4 car that will be successful. And then Tesla will will basically propel Tesla to, you know, the biggest automaker.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very interesting you say that. And I think the confirmation came once that the Secret Master Plan Part 2 came out, I guess, and he said, Elon wrote about sort of entering every single market segment. So it wasn't even just the Model, I guess, 2 or whatever they want to call it nowadays. It's really literally every segment. So that's super interesting that you were able to identify that early on. I'm curious too, like, so if you take the 2012, 2013 run and you put that next to the 2019, 2020 run that we've had, which one's more surprising for you?
Actually, I think, that's a tough one because both, the first one was more significant to me because that was the one that took, you know, our investments, you know, 5-6x right off the bat. And that was like the most significant because it had personally the most it moved the needle the most, you know? And this last time though, with the whole, you know, 2020 run and even into 2021, it was kind of like gravy on top of things. It's like, I knew that Tesla would get to $1 trillion market cap eventually at some time.
Sure.
It just surprised me. It was so fast and so early, but it didn't change my life and my kind of decisions at all.
Gotcha.
Like it has had almost zero impact on that. And so from a personal standpoint, the first run was definitely the biggest, you know, impact. But absolute terms, this last run was crazy because completely, I would say completely unexpected, but it really shocked me how fast things came.
Yeah, I can relate to that because the first run, I had $10,000 in Tesla stock. That was like my life savings. I just started the workforce. I graduated college. And then that run up enabled me to buy a house. And I'm like, holy crap, this is incredible. This is the best thing ever. And then this last run up in 2019, 2020 allowed me to like just discover who I am as a person, exit the workforce and go on that journey. So it's like, for me, my life changed twice. You know, it's spectacular that I was so fortunate to be able to, you know, be part of that, not just as a fan, as an investor beforehand, but then also working at the company as well. It was like the most surreal experience for me. So I think for me, it's like both of them were completely nuts. It's very interesting to get your perspective on that. Just switching gears a little bit here on the Electrified podcast, you talked about moving to Austin. So it sounds like you're living in California and Austin sort of part-time and sort of taking the RV around. How's Austin treating you? How do you like it out here?
Yeah, Austin is great. My kids and I and wife, we just came back from like hiking, beautiful hiking in Austin, especially West Side. Yeah. And we love it here. It's not as nice in terms of weather. There's lots of mosquitoes. There's like pollen allergies, etc. But it's fantastic. The city is great. We love it. And for us, it's more like I like to be kind of mobile, meaning I want to give my kids a world kind of experience living. And so for the past couple of years, we've been traveling in an RV a lot and checking out lots of national parks and stuff. Last year, we were in an RV for 4.5 months, like living in it. Yeah, while doing like YouTube as well. It's like insane. And this is like a small 25-foot RV. It's not like a big one either.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Very intimate.
Yeah. But I'm dying to actually take my kids overseas and hopefully live overseas up to maybe even 6 months or more out of every year. We'll see. I'd love to give my kids an international type of experience growing up.
That is awesome. What countries were you thinking?
I'd like to hit all continents and I like the idea of actually spending at least a few months in a location at a time to kind of get a deep feel of the culture and environment. I did. I spent 5 years out of my 20s living overseas, and it completely changed the view, how I view the world in so many ways. And I feel like it's underrated. Travel, understanding different cultures, languages, peoples, etc. Yeah.
I can only imagine. That's sort of the journey my wife and I are on now. That's what we want to get into. I almost wish our like schools would promote international travel more, because I feel like, I took some trips myself. It was just myself and my wife and I took a trip. We went to South Africa. That was one a really cool one that we did. But I feel like just being part of the culture, of a different culture for just 10 days, it just really gives you a different perspective, especially if you see people in vastly different circumstances than you are. I think it really puts in perspective sometimes just how lucky you are as a person, And I think at an early age, getting that, it's amongst other things, it's totally invaluable,
Yeah, I think one of the things is it's very humbling in a sense.
Yeah.
Like you go to another culture, language, country, customs, all that. And if you stay long enough and if you get immersed enough, you get this feeling like, oh my gosh, I know nothing. Yeah. Like I don't know the language. I don't understand these people's value, like how they see things. I don't know the history of what's going on here. It's like, you start to realize like, oh my gosh, there's so much to learn. And it's not just this place, but it's like hundreds and hundreds of cultures and peoples around the world. And it connects you to thousands and thousands of years of history. And I think part of that, I want my kids to learn, because that triggers this hunger to learn, this curiosity. It's like, oh my gosh, I need to, there's so much to learn. I think a lot of times kids grow up in today's schools and environments where they don't have this sense of awe and wonder of the world, where they're like, oh my gosh, there's so much to learn. I can't wait. The first thing they wake up in the morning, that's not what they're thinking, it's like, and I think like that to me is more important than, in a way, the learning itself, like the actual desire to learn. Yeah. And I think that needs to be cultivated. And travel is fantastic. Yeah. I
agree with that 100%. Just all the different doors that can open from that, just a different exposure. And I feel like it would enable you to really be a better, just be able to think on the fly a little bit better, because you're exposed to all these different things. You're not so much recalling what you learned in school, but you can sort of correlate things you're seeing in real life to like, oh my God, reminds me of the thing I saw in South Africa, or reminds me of the thing I saw in, whatever random country that I was at, I think that's that's a very insightful point. And just on that point too, so you're a father and you have children, and you've talked to a lot of people that are forward thinkers, brilliant in the way that they think about the different things that are going on in the world. I'm curious, after having this your channel, and talking with all those people, are you generally optimistic or pessimistic about what's coming down the pike as a father? Like, do you think we're heading somewhere good, or do you think we're heading somewhere else? Yeah.
Wow, that's actually interesting. I mean, that's a fascinating question.
Sure.
Like, I'm torn, actually, to be honest, because I'm optimistic about the future, generally speaking, sure. And I see the potential for the future to be very good. But on the flip side, I'm also a realist, and I'm very connected to the state of the human kind of condition. And when I look at history, thousands and thousands of years, all civilizations, all countries, all peoples, there's so much strife and so much death and war and violence. And the roots of what's causing that, I'm not seeing that change much in today's society. Like we think like, oh my gosh, we haven't had, a big war in like 70 years or at least a world war, we're over that. But the reality is, have humans really changed much, in 70 years, like in the scope of like thousands and thousands of years, right? Sure, we've had a brief sliver of peace in terms of global war. But to me, there's a decent chance that that's actually just a sliver, and the future reverts back to, the mean of what's gone on throughout history. And if that happens, like, things get messy. And with more technology, with more power, with nuclear weapons, with military might and drones and everything, like we're talking about, the world could get really messy very fast. And so on the flip side, though, you have a lot of things that are positive. The world is more global, more connected. We're making inroads into poverty. Technology is giving people access to education and opportunity like never before. And there's a sense of a global identity and a global culture that's arising in some ways, that's bringing together humankind, which could lead to a paradigm shift where actually peace is more of a mean than war. So this is like, we're in a deep struggle right now. I don't think it's decided yet, actually. I think actually we are in the middle of this birth pain of what the future is going to look like. And I don't think people are talking about this enough, the deeper issues at hand. Hope that kind of gives you some sense of how I'm viewing things.
No, that's great. And it sounds like it, I mean, do you spend a lot of time thinking about this? Like, are you constantly like pondering where we're going to go? Or is it just something like, is it one of those things that life sort of takes over and then you're like, okay, what's going to happen to the future? I'm just curious how much of your mental power gets consumed by this sort of existential sort of threat that we might have,
Yeah. So it goes way back, and I've spent decades on this. Like for example, in college, right now I'm 48. I think
I'm surprised to hear that, dude.
Yeah.
You look younger than I do. I'm 34.
No, but back in college, I studied this thing. This major is political economy. It was basically poli-sci and economics, but it was also I was able to focus on Asia as well and economic development. And it was a mashup of history, economics, poli-sci, international relations, everything. And it was quite fascinating because I was able to kind of see how countries developed and what the role of government and economy and compared to different forms of, approaches. And I was able to really get a grasp of, history as well in the past few hundred years, thousands of years. And ever since then, I've been fascinated by the bigger questions of where are things headed, because I think ultimately, for example, we look at Tesla stock, this week, it's down and Elon's selling and we might be like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But if you zoom out a little bit, does it really matter this week in the scope of even in 1 year? 1 year ago, Tesla stock was much lower than it is now. It's like, why are we freaking out about today or this week? But if you zoom out 10 years or even 100 years, even longer, then things change. And so, ultimately, for example, with World War II or so, or different things, different big wars, it's like people didn't expect those things to happen, but yet they ripped society apart in so many ways. Millions of people died, families just got, crushed in different ways. But that's something that were the people in control of that? Did they understand what was going on? No, it was largely handled by big foreign powers and people in government making those decisions on behalf of the lives of millions and millions of people around the world. And I'm afraid like that dynamic hasn't changed, like people think that they're in control. They think that their future is guaranteed. They know, what's going to happen 10 years, 30, 20 years down the road. My retirement is mine, everything, but it could flip like a switch, when things go awry. But yeah, that's why it's so fascinating to me, because the implications, the impact are so profound, in size and scope.
I agree. Do you think that sort of ability to zoom out and see the world on a larger time scale, do you think that's something that can be learned, or do you think that's just a natural ability that people have?
Yeah, I'm not sure. All I know is like the past several years, I used to think that my thinking or my approach of looking at things from different angles and different time frames, and I thought that was just like everyone did that. I thought that was just common. And like back when I first was writing in Tesla's Motors Club back in 2012, 13, I thought like everyone with their investments like thought deeply and had big theses and spent a lot of time thinking about it. It was shocking when I was like, I learned like, wait a minute, most people don't have that. I'm like, wow. But yeah, I think one of the things that I don't know how or what's happened to allow that, but I kind of naturally look at many, many different angles. So I look at something, I'll look at lots of different angles, and then I'll look at lots of different time frames. And it all is kind of like one thing to me. And then I'm okay sitting with it for a long time and just like meditating and thinking about it. And so in a lot of ways, I'm not very reactionary, where if one thing happens, I'm not overly emotional, and, I'm kind of like, it's just one thing of the many angles. And I take a step back, and I could play around, a little bit with what's happening emotionally, reactionary a bit, but ultimately I feel the most comfortable sitting back and seeing like hundreds of things happening all at once and thinking about it in a deep manner. So even like this week, for example, like lots of stuff happened with the Fed, with stocks and all this stuff. And, I'm tempted to like, chime in on all this stuff, but my natural kind of like sweet spot is I'll take it all in and I'll sit back and think more on a little bit a semi-philosophical angle. Sure. Like, what is the meaning of all this? And then I could work backwards and try to figure out, how to respond on the day to day. But yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know, like, if how it's learned, but maybe one thing though is I think it's like growing up, I hated reading. It was just like, I just never read. And even throughout high school, it was just a chore to read. And then in college, I learned how to read. I had a history professor who said, professors, we give you reading assignments not for you to finish them all, like slowly, but for you to like basically speed read them and get the core of it. And so it transformed my way of understanding what reading is, where I started to read fast and just get the core arguments. And then later on, I started to post-college read a lot of books on lots of different topics. Like I would go to this library that was close, and I would actually just pick out just like stacks of 10, 15 books, and I would read them in one afternoon, like really fast. Wow. And they would be on different topics like sociology or art or music, history, just like different stuff that I was like, I'd look at different interesting book titles and just spend a day or, doing that. And after doing that for several years, it just like, I hit a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, I understand these areas. Really, like not in the sense that I could give like, a detailed like college lecture on the minute things, more on the sense of, oh my gosh, I get the essence of like the stuff. I get the essence of sociology, of history, of this and this. Like I understand it. Like the door opened, it just clicked. And from there, that's when it just, my way of thinking just opened up immensely. And then with business and investing, I did the same thing. I read thousands of books and very, very fast. And there was a certain point where I'm like, oh, this is what it's about. You know, this is what business and investing is about. I get it. I understand it. Not from kind of a shallow view, but more from this, like you get it from inside out, not from like outside in. It's a weird thing. It's like one example is like, you know, if you're really good at a sport, you know, it's like you know it from the inside out. It's just like, it's just there.
Second nature, right? It just happens.
You don't have to play for 10 years and you just play a couple times and you get it all back. You know, it's just all there. And that's kind of a similar analogy, you know, with business investing or other stuff. It's you learn it so well that it just it becomes part of you. And I think that's part of the background of, you know, why I kind of look at things from different angles and, you know, different time frames and try to go deep and then think and meditate on stuff.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And I think that's what gives you such a unique, like, I mean, you just described it. I think that's the unique voice behind your channel, is the fact that you have such a wide world view in the different things that you've studied. I'm curious, like you talked about the essence of something that you learned. How many, like, are those essences, is there commonality between the different domains that you've studied? Or are they all vastly different? Or do they somehow just connect? And is that what allows you to sort of think from a much broader level? I'm curious to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think there are commonalities in like every field out there. One of the commonalities is the unknown. Like, for example, take history or take art or music or sociology or any, you know, topic. What's fascinating is people just don't know exactly. Like, for example, you take the history of China, for example, in the 1800s or something. And what's fascinating is you would think that there is a clear like understanding of what happened, right? A consensus. But what the essence of a lot of, for example, history of China in the 1800s isn't so much like, oh, this event happened. It's more like, okay, why did that happen? What's going on? And so you could say, okay, there was a cyclical kind of, you know, thing going on in Chinese history in the 1800s. Or you could say there was a broader theme that was just like, you know, throughout the whole 1800s that was more powerful than a cyclical thing. And the thing is, scholars will debate this and it will be a tension. There's a tension where people just don't understand or know. So everyone has a theory about it, right? And that's like really a commonality. Like people are looking at like what's happened, but they don't we're not sure like exactly what's going on. And so we make our guesses and it forms different camps of understanding. And the shortcut to understanding like a field is to quickly understand those camps. Right. And once you understand the camps, then you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like 1800s China, like this is what, you know, this is what people think or, you know, about why China went through what it did. But this applies to almost everything out there, every field. It's like humans are so fascinating. They're so curious. They're always wanting to understand something. Like, why did it happen? Same thing with music, like, or arts. Like, why did this happen? Like, why did this music or this art style come about? Like, what? And there are different camps. So it's like fascinating. You just learn about it. You go, oh my gosh, yeah. You know, why did this type of classical music or this thing come up? Or why did hip hop come up? Or why did rock come up? Or, you know, et cetera. And you find the major camps that are having the strongest type of opposing views in a different way. And then this opens up a whole new way to kind of understand and to appreciate, you know, that field. And it's similar across all fields. But the thing is, most people don't learn this. They don't learn that it's because a lot of times it's like academics and all these people who write the books, they are under this impression that they're the best, they're the right person, they have the so-called truth and stuff. And so you read the book and you're like, oh, I have to believe and trust this guy, you know, and it kind of locks you in and it kills the curiosity, you know. But yeah, if when you realize it's more open-ended and you realize like everything that happens, you know, in history has a different angle. You know, everything that's going on in society too right now has a different angle, multiple angles. And And the more you just understand the main camps, it unlocks the door of understanding. And you could just do circles around, just doing all these different topics. And it's just fascinating. Yeah.
Man, this is resonating with me so much. And I feel like you're giving a master class on how to critically think about everything right now. Like really just trying to take every angle that you can to learn about whatever subject that you're trying to tackle, but making sure that you're well-rounded in your knowledge so you can actually get to a reasonable conclusion instead of just being fed whatever information you're being told is correct and then going ahead with it. And the fact that it's applicable to so many different fields, I think that's the beauty behind it. And thank you so much for that detail, Dave.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I think, does it feel like a superpower to have that? Because I feel like if you master that, you can really, it's almost like you become I'm not saying that you're an oracle, you're going to be able to predict everything 100%, but it must give you some sort of confidence knowing that having this ability does give you some sort of advantage.
I mean, there's pros and cons. I want to say pros and cons, but yeah, it's strange because like one example is, let's say you do this over hundreds of different topics and, areas, and you have the major camps and you understand them, whether it's in philosophy or art or sociology or whatever, economics, government.
Yeah.
What happens is you learn to respect the views. Like, let's say there's 2 or 3 main views on a specific, area. You learn to respect them and realize that, they could be right. This one could be right. This one, like you realize there's a humility involved. And once you do this over hundreds and hundreds of different, areas, it doesn't it doesn't mean that you can't have your own opinion. You need to, choose one as like the most likely, but there's also this equal respect toward the opposing view that you learn, and you learn to appreciate, because you need that respect in order to learn, to form your opinion. Like, that's the thing. If I don't have respect for the opposing sides, then I'm not going to have a strong opinion myself, because I haven't learned the opposing sides enough.
Right.
Like, my opinion will come as a result somewhat of counter reactionary force to another opinion. And so I need that respect. The way this plays out, though, is like, it makes it challenging for me sometimes to latch on to a specific publication or a specific type of maybe YouTube channel or podcast who's trying to explain things. When I listen, it's like I'm constantly like, they're not getting this angle. Like, they're just like, maybe they're so tech heavy. They're so tech heavy, and they're so like, in their world, it makes sense. And I completely understand it. But I'm like, there's these other areas that they just, aren't strong and they haven't been exposed to. And it impacts the way they view the world and the future. And I just pick it up. And it actually sometimes, like, it's very uncomfortable for me to have to go through that. If I didn't have that, I'd be much more, I think, taking in more information even from more people. I think it's just,
You're all now calling everybody out on their YouTube, like, hey, what the hell? So that's the downside is it does like, it does this weird thing where some people might, could say that, hey, I could be too picky, I could be too critical of, whatever. But it's not that I'm trying to do that at all. It's just that I think in order to accurately assess things, a lot of things, they have so many different factors involved that you have to respect the different things in there. And if you can only really identify a few of those factors, you're going to be at a huge disadvantage. And that's the thing, predicting or even trying to assess the future, this has got to be one of the most difficult things to do, because there's so many factors and things are changing so fast, right? There's a timing factor. There's like governments and economy, businesses and technology and sociology and culture and crowds and so many different nuances. And like, I'm not even very good at it, assessing the future, I think. But I'm just trying to get a passing grade. Sure.
That's all I want,
You have a C, the rest of us have a D or an F.
No, I don't know. I don't care about,
I know.
I'm picking, but I'm just like, it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard that, I want every advantage or every sense of, thing I can get.
Yeah, and I think the like how I think about that is like everything ever is human created, right? And humans are very complex by nature. So the fact that you're describing this, I think those two things line up really well for me in my head, because it's like you're just dealing with man-made things all the time. It doesn't matter if it's economics or whatever. Tesla stock doesn't really matter. Everything's man-made. Everything's human created. So I feel like, and humans are very complex beings. So it makes a lot of sense that you need that sort of multifaceted view into trying to analyze something instead of just being very, single, I guess like a single-minded, I guess, or, just being very focused on one thing.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I would also say that even like there are many things that are human created, but then there's a lot of things that aren't, human created that in a way they're related in a lot of ways. And like, for example, sometimes like when I just think and sit back and meditate a bit on the craziness of what's going on, like I'm reading hundreds of stories and all this stuff, it's like a lot of times it's hard to find reality or truth or objectiveness in that noise and chaos, because sometimes it's not isolated, meaning it's connected to a bigger reality in a bigger type of sense of a lot of like truths of investing or business or whatever, economy, government, they're related to stuff outside of human existence, even, I think.
Okay.
Like to the universe, to the world, to nature. And there's a groundedness, I think, that comes when we are able to just accept that, they're connected in some ways, even though we haven't discovered all the connections. But that's part of the profoundness. Like I look at, for example, investing or business, I think it's much more profound than anyone gives credit to. Or even the economy. Like think how amazing an economy is, or even culture or language. How are we even communicating with each other?
Yeah. Pretty nuts.
Yeah. It's crazy. There's so much
wild
stuff, but there seems to be though an immense amount of order and power and truth and objectivity in the world, in nature, in just the universe that we're humans are tapping into. Yeah.
Fascinating. I mean, it kind of like when you say that reminds you of the comment, Elon, that, if you let hydrogen hang out long enough, it becomes human beings, right? Everything in the world we all come from the same place, right? So it's like, I feel like I have to watch this whole thing like 20 times because there's just so many like nuggets of insight you just shared with us, Dave. That's amazing. I do want to jump back to something when we're talking about when you're thinking about the future, right? And the sort of, there is a good outcome and a bad outcome. You're not really sure which one's going to win. Do you think a lot of Elon's sort of, the attention that he gets, the positive attention that he gets, like sort of like, I count myself as that person. I'm sure you do as well. But we see him as somebody that's a very good thing for the future. Do you think that's like the sort of that struggle that's happening, and he stands for that good side? That if he's able to get us to Mars and do the things that he wants to do, do you think he sort of is like the primary person in a world today that's trying to push that forward? I'm curious to hear if that resonates with you at all.
Yeah, definitely. I think. I do think that what Elon has, like, that's the thing that sticks out for Elon the most for me. Like, for example, I have a lot of things that I differ with Elon in terms of values and approach, etc. It's like I'm not particularly into like, the work ethic and like the focus, like. Like I have different values, right? I mean, I just, like one of my core values is I'm trying to like really focus on my kids and and setting their values and future. And, I want to do a decent job with that. But my kind of approach is very different. And it's like one of my main focuses, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that like with Elon, even though we differ in a lot of ways, he's doing something that that is it's different. Meaning most CEOs, it's like you say, okay, I'm going to create a company, make money, retire, and have this stash, right? And then give it to the next generation or something. What Elon is doing is he's saying, okay, I don't care about giving a stash to the next generation. It's like, I'm trying to, take the outcome of humanity. And if it's on the brink of this like positive, negative, I want to do as much as I can to move it positive in the biggest ways possible. And he's doing something that's so mind-boggling in terms of how big he's absolutely going for what is the biggest practical type of, things like space or climate change, etc. And so I respect him for that he actually will think beyond his own condition, his own state. And he'll say, whether I live or die or whatever, that's not as important as the state of the future of humanity. My angle is what I'm a little bit, I would say questioning, but I feel like there's another part of it, which is the mental / the human condition part. That's not necessarily physics related and engineering related, where, for example, we have a ton of, rise of mental illness. We have a ton of just relational issues / human, suffering. And not all of that there's another side of humanity that I think it has plagued the human race for the longest time. I'm fascinated by that side as well. I think Elon's taking the engineering, the physics, and he's tackling the biggest problems he can with his more scientific approach, which is, I'm all for it. I'm like, I'll put all my money in that. But I think there's another side, like a yin yang. There's this other side, which is, okay, what's that equivalent going to be for the human soul, in a sense? I
gotcha. Right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, so do you think that an Elon-like figure exists today that can sort of drive that forward, or do you think we need one, or do you think it's a collective? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's much more difficult problem to solve because there's so many things we don't know about the world and our bodies. Like, for example, it's like medicine and what we know today about the body is just like, I don't even think we know even less than 1% of what there is to know about the body. Maybe 0.01%, or
I agree.
It's minuscule, of what we really, could know about the body.
Yeah.
And so I think to solve like some of these bigger human kind of condition issues, it's going to take a lot more knowledge and information and time. What the masterful thing of what Elon has done is he's taken like on the science, engineering, physics side, he's taken like all of what's possible and he's gone all in on what the tipping point is right now, what's achievable right now, not achievable just in 100 years.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's the genius of Elon, where he's like, he'll take all of the power of design, engineering, all this stuff, and he says, what is possible right now? And he'll go all in on that.
Yeah.
And that starts the company. That's the spark, to start one of his companies. And so, it's tough on the other side, where it's much more like on the humanity / human condition side. It's much more difficult, I think. But I think we have to solve both in order to have a better future. Just because we have better technology, et cetera, it's like, who cares if we're going to kill everyone,
Yeah. It might make it worse unless you have that counterbalance there, right? Like if like you have screens are, they're everywhere, and there's, that social media and God knows how many different things. And then you think about maybe, having full self-driving in the future makes you very isolated because you just want to travel by yourself everywhere. You don't want to, share a vehicle with anybody else. That's so, and I agree with you 100% on that, on the humanity side too. And it's like, I'm just like, when I think about it in sort of my terms, and I think about it where we are today, it just seems, especially in the United States, that division that we're suffering from right now, I think speaks to that. It's like we've somehow lost sort of that humanity aspect. And I'm trying not to be pessimistic about it because I have no idea how we get out of it, right? It seems like And I saw, maybe this is a weird segue, but that tweet that Elizabeth Warren and Elon were having, that's, I don't know if it's a perfect correlation there, but it kind of speaks to like, there's just all these status games and power games that are going on to try and like one up the other person and utilize someone's, what they're perceiving to do wrong. And they're using that to sort of attack the person. That's like, I think it's, from my perspective, that's sort of how I think about that. But if we can shift gears, since I brought it up, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you think about that whole Elizabeth Warren Elon thing? I saw you tweet about it a few minutes ago. Like, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic because it's bigger than what I think most people realize. It's not just Elon and Elizabeth Warren spatting at things.
Yeah.
There are root causes that are going on where, you have tension that has accrued from, the past 20, 30 years of globalization, of technology, of just modern societies. And what we have is this place where we're at right now where it should be like, here's the thing, 20 years ago, when people thought that, oh, here's the beginning of the internet, like they thought it would solve every problem. They didn't think that, people would feel this economic stagnation that they do at the lower end of the economic spectrum. They thought that it would solve every problem. Like, think about it. You have the greatest economic growth engine in the history of the world. Why wouldn't it solve, economic problems? And so if you look at it, there's been something that's gone wrong in the past 20 years. If you had the greatest inventions, right, with the computer and internet and all this stuff, yet you have such discontent, and economic stagnation at this lower spectrum. And I think that's one of the core issues that's at hand, because Elizabeth Warren is saying, hey, like, the billionaires are playing it's an unfair game and they need to give it back. And it's rigged in her words. Yep. And Elon is saying, wait a minute, I'm playing the game that has the biggest potential, which means we need to be productive. We need to create value. We need to, and ultimately that's going to be the thing that gets us out of this, where you create so much value, you create so many jobs and opportunities, and you make the world better. And Elon's view is kind of like, shouldn't the government at least try not to mess things up like they've done the past 20 years? Like that's, like I'm doing what is the good thing, And Elizabeth Warren is taking the opposite. She's like, oh, government isn't at fault. It's the rich people who are trying to, take advantage of the situation. And you have it's like a philosophical divide that I think it's going to get worse over time. Because if you think about it, what's happened with COVID and the whole asset appreciation, inflation, money printing, all this stuff, you have had massive amounts of asset appreciation. But on the flip side, there's been a whole class in society that has not benefited from that at all. Zero, and what actually has had a negative, because now it's harder to get a house. It's harder to do what you wanted to do before. Yep. And this is going to cause, perhaps, obviously nothing is for sure, but a crazy amount of instability, and kind of unknownness, uncertainty about the future. And what Elizabeth Warren and Elon Musk going at it, this is just a sample, of many spats, from many different types of people. Yeah. And we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think there's ever a chance for them to, I guess call it the left, the Democrats and Elon? Because it does seem like, with Biden sort of not mentioning Tesla and Elon, you got Elizabeth Warren, the whole Bernie thing. Do you think there's a chance for reconciliation at some point, or do you think this is part of that whole, it's going to get more unstable and that feud's just going to get, deeper and worse?
Yeah, I mean, my bet or my hunch is it does get worse. Yeah. And the reason is that when you look at the underlying kind of philosophy of some of the extreme political sides, they tend to be quite strong and defined, meaning it's not as simple, for example, with Warren or Sanders, it's not as simple, let's, treat people more fairly, there is a very, very clear philosophy, and it's very, very developed in a way where it's a philosophy that the wealthy are kind of almost immoral in their accumulation and their greed of wealth. And to the point where it's almost it's a tension where, you know, they're questioning capitalism, you know, as we know it.
Yeah.
And it ties into, when I look at it, it ties into various political ideologies of the past. And I'm not going to equate it with certain, you know, exactly, because everything changes and evolves and, you know, and that. But yeah, when I look at history, I'm always one that doesn't underestimate the power of a political philosophy. Because if you look at history, like, political philosophies have done the most, I think. Political and religious philosophies have done the most to shape societies and the course of history than almost any other thing, you know, good or bad. And so we're in one of these, like, I think, crisis moments where we have this growing chorus of people yearning for something extreme to fix societal problems. And so we're, you know, grabbing into extreme bags of ideology. And I don't think this is, I mean, yeah, it's, you
sounds dire.
Yeah. You have enough demand for that's going to be there. And, yeah, it's a tough one.
Wow. Do you think there's a chance, and, you know, I maybe one more question on the politics things, because I obviously I don't, you know, there's other things I want to ask you, but I'm just very curious about this. Do you think there's a chance for a third party to ever, because the way I look at the current, especially in the US, like, I feel like having two parties is one of the reasons why that instability exists. That's why that sort of, you know, the growing division is a driving force behind that, I think. Do you think that there is a chance for a third party to be a legitimate, or maybe fourth, fifth, sixth party to be a legitimate thing that could potentially solve some of these more societal issues? I'm curious to pick your brain on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so my perspective is, oftentimes politics will go to where the strongest ideologies are, and the strongest ideologies are usually the ones that are pushed by the people who are willing to sacrifice the most.
Sure.
And what's concerning about this whole situation is, yeah, we have strong, extreme ideologies on both sides that are gaining ground with people willing to put their lives down for this stuff. See, the problem is people in the middle, they're not willing to put their lives down for much anything. It's kind of like, you know, keep me out of this stuff. Like, I'm just going to do my own thing. Leave me alone. You know, the people who are really, like, you know, passionate / you know, they'll take a hit for it, you know, are the people on the extremes. And typically in history, that those are the people who determine the future, because eventually, as one, you know, kind of ideology snowballs, and that's the thing, you need an ideology to snowball, to grow bigger. But the ideology that doesn't have a core fanatic base that's willing to put their lives into it usually can't snowball like that. And so this is where it's like, yeah, you've got these two extreme sides with strong ideologies that they're trying to snowball, like grow their ideologies to make it the dominant force. But the middle doesn't have an ideology per se, you know, it doesn't have that same sacrifice and grit. And so my kind of take is, the hope is not necessarily a third party or something, but two parties are fine. You need a leader to step up who will kind of bridge these, like, extremes in a way that is almost like genius. Meaning, you need someone who will be one party and really understand the extremes of that party, but they understand the extremes of the other party too, and they come up with, like, reasonable solutions, like really well thought out, practical, you know, ideas that throw off people, because they're not, like, exactly what one party wants or what one party's extreme wants. Yeah. But it's eventually they are able to get enough consensus from both extremes, and the middle follows. That's kind of my hope, but a lot of is dependent on an extremely gifted, charismatic, and competent kind of leader to step up. I don't think we've had a competent president in I don't know, probably over 30 years.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean,
that's my take.
Yeah, I've been following politics since maybe 2012. I was in school before that. I think one person that came up in the last election. So I don't know if you've heard of Andrew Yang, but that was somebody for me, it sort of seemed like embodied some of those things you talked about that sort of appealed to both aisles. Very pragmatic, seemed to think about problems holistically and not just driving a party line. But obviously that didn't work out, but I'm just very curious to see where that's such a hard, I feel like that entire conversation can be like a 4-hour long, just in-depth talk. Cause man, there's a lot in there. One more piece there. Do you think the government's going to be a legitimate obstacle for Tesla and Elon here in the next couple of years? How do you think about that?
Yeah, in this recent Financial Times article or interview with Elon, he said he was 99.9% confident they'll get to level 5 soon, but he said, okay, I'll round it up to 100. And I think there is a slight, perhaps, sense where 0.01%, chance in Elon's mind where he's like, well, it could take longer than expected. There could be, some regulation pushback, et cetera. And I think, and he also mentioned that with self-driving, you could save 90% of the lives out there that would have, been a victim of fatal auto crashes, but the remaining 10% of people who die are going to sue you.
Sure.
And it's this reality where it's not a very sexy business to be in, where you're saving a bunch of lives, but the optics can be, tilted to where you're killing people.
Yeah.
And this is something that is going to be, I think, a huge, huge battle ahead for Tesla and others is, can they win the narrative, that autonomous driving is about saving lives. It's not about the headline pieces of this person died and, this car crashed into this or whatever, because that's a great clickbait story, and that's a great, that's going to get, media outlets to run with it. But, when you take a step back, you're like, wait a minute, you're saving 90% or more, of the lives out there.
Yeah.
Isn't it a good thing? And so, I'm concerned about Missy Cummings, her appointment to NHTSA as senior advisor. She's very, critical and negative about Tesla's efforts. And she's not going to go down without fighting, meaning she's going to put up a fight and others, with this. But I mean, the hope is Elon and Tesla execute meticulously like they have been. They show the data as more and more miles, you have, just more and more cars. For example, you've got 1 million Teslas out there and you can show data and, you'll get another million and a half perhaps next year. And so this will snowball over time. It's just going to take time for the data to overshadow and outweigh the voices of the critics, right? So it'll be messy. I'm not as optimistic as some in terms of robotaxi timeline. I used to be more optimistic. Now I'm thinking, this could take, a few more years than, maybe first anticipated.
Gotcha. And is that because of the exposure you had firsthand with the software?
Yeah. It's a combination where, it's fascinating. So I've been able to use FSD beta from version 9.0 until now. And initially my reaction was, I was expecting more. I was like, oh man, this is it's stressful, and it's not helping me that much.
Yeah.
Later on, by version 10 or so, it actually started to get pretty good, actually good enough where I'm like, hey, this is actually helping me drive local streets.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be a big jump, and it happened quicker than I expected, for it to be a useful driving aid for local streets. And what I'm seeing is Tesla is improving it radically fast, but there's still these areas where it just doesn't do well, and it's so hard. And every time that happens, I'm reminded how difficult this problem is.
Sure.
And how like it's just such a crazy hard problem. And it gives me more confidence that Tesla is in the runaway lead. And the reason is because I don't think other companies are crazy enough to do what Tesla's doing right now. It's so crazy. And in a way, it's like most companies are like, forget it, LiDAR, HD maps, like just cap it out at 35 miles, 40 miles per hour. That's it.
Gotcha.
Like, that's what makes sense to 99 out of 100 people.
Wow.
And so for Tesla to do what they're doing, it shows me that they're really the only ones, I think, really going for it. They're the only ones really believing in truly autonomous driving, like in all situations, generalized autonomous driving. So I don't think they really have much competition. It will take longer than some of us Tesla, fans hope. But all that means is that it's just the longer it takes, it just means that that's how much harder the problem really is and how much more almost impossible it is for others to solve the problem. It's actually bullish. It's bullish the longer it takes.
For sure, right?
It's just showing the difficulty of the problem.
It's almost like once Tesla gets there, it's almost market dominance because the damn things, you need so much time and so much data to get it there. Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Do you think that the sort of the potential narrative around how dangerous it's going to be is going to finally get Elon and Tesla to maybe put a PR department together and actually start to fight back? Or maybe Elon, I don't know, gets his own media company. I have no freaking idea. But do you think it's going to incentivize Tesla to finally try to not just have Elon on Twitter, but try to drive the narrative some other way?
Yeah. I think the PR thing is, I'm not sure if we're going to get a PR team as long as Elon is running the company.
Okay.
I just think he realizes he doesn't need one, and he knows that bad press hurts Tesla, but on the flip side, he knows he has a great product. He knows like they've done the right thing in his fanatic focus on the product, and he knows they have a dominant lead in autopilot autonomous driving, and he knows the data is going to win, and he knows Tesla is in such a good financial position with growing profits that he doesn't see existential risk, let's say with Tesla, right, as a company. So I don't know. It just seems like Elon would just say, hey, we'll double down on what we've been doing, and we'll just, I don't want to spend more energy on PR. The problem with PR, and you might be more familiar with it, is Elon is actually very, very meticulous in the message he presents or what Tesla shares. And like several years ago, I was talking to a Tesla PR, one of the main people there, and she was telling me, she's like, yeah, Elon needs to okay every single thing that comes out. Like, and sometimes like they're waiting on him, just, that's the bottleneck. He's just waiting on his reply. Yeah. And when people don't realize, like, oh, just do a PR department, what they don't realize is certain things Elon cares about. He cares about what the message that gets out from Tesla. And he feels like he needs to okay everything. Like, he needs to okay the messaging on the website and the design. He needs to okay all sorts of stuff, every press release, everything. And that takes up a lot of time and energy and headache for him. And he just doesn't like it, and he just doesn't want to do it. And it's like, he'd rather do another engineering meeting, and make the product better rather than, doing something he doesn't like. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. I'm just not optimistic that Elon will change his mind on this though.
Sure. No, I can tell you, I mean, internally, like there were times where, we had, some freezes around spending or hiring or whatever, when we're going through some sort of a period in the company, and it's like, well, Elon has to prove everything. And I'm like, you tell me Elon's going to go through 40,000 applications and sign off? I'm like, it's just sitting on his desk. It's just a way for him to just be like, I don't want to deal with this right now. Just freeze everything, right? So I can definitely, that's very interesting. Switching gears real quick. You seem like a high output individual. You seem like somebody who's able to generate a lot of value, and is always engaged in something, be it parenting or creating videos. Do you find it hard to relax, or is that something that comes naturally, or is it something that you learned, or are you still trying to master it? I'm curious to hear your opinion on that. Are you able to just be like at peace, and relax?
Yeah. I actually been thinking about this a lot lately, where my mechanism or strategy to get things done, yet have kind of this, be chill at the same time.
Yeah.
Is I have this mechanism where I kind of, I simplify my life so much where like, I barely like the only things I do are YouTube and my family, basically.
Okay.
Like I don't really have much of a life outside of that.
Sure.
And keeping up with the world. So I keep up with the world, and that's in YouTube, investing, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's my family, and that's pretty much it. And then what's funny is I'm constantly downsizing like what I do. So like, for example, my wife is like, "Oh man, don't you need some new clothes? You haven't gotten clothes in like ages, right? They like holes all over the place. Like, I haven't bought clothes in like 3 or 4 years or whatever."
Sure.
And I'm like, no, I'm like, no, I don't.
I'm good.
And she's like, "Don't you need new shoes? Like your shoes, you haven't bought shoes in ages." Like, no. It's like, the reason is not that I don't want shoes.
Right.
It's like, I just don't want more things in my life to think about and have to do, like, oh, do I really want to go shopping? And do I really want to, focus on whatever? And sure, it might just be I'll do little things here and there, but like, another thing is like, do I want to spread out, my activities? Like, for example, there's so many things that I could do, but I'm actually like, always defaulting to saying, okay, if I do all of these things, I'm going to be in this place of chaos, in a sense, in my mind. And I just I almost short circuit in a way when I get too stressed. It's just, I don't know.
I'm the same way.
For me, it's like when I get stressed and I start to feel this negativity around and my energy starts to change, then it's like, I'm not in a good place. That's just like, that's not where I want to be. I'm not adding much value in that situation. And so what I want to be, and what I've done actually pretty successfully over the past maybe actually 10 plus years actually, is what I do is I hyper focus on something that gives massive output for a decent amount of effort, not too much effort, just like very, very manageable. And then the rest of my schedule, and I don't have responsibilities. I just it's relational, like hanging out with my kids, like traveling, doing stuff. And that keeps my schedule open. So I rarely have a calendar. Like I barely have anything on my calendar. I barely have any other commitments, any other things I have to do. My day's always open. I'm trying to like learn about the world, share a bit on YouTube, and hang out with my family. And so I've kind of realized that place for me personally is something that I could do forever, and I enjoy it. And yet there's decent amount of, output too, right? With investing and impacting others.
That sounds awesome. It sounds very sustainable. And I think that's the key takeaway there for me. So I guess that is the overarching thought process. Just try to simplify as much as possible so they can enjoy the little things. Is that a good way of thinking about it? Just to be present.
I think it's more like I know what I can handle, and I don't want to overload, my system where, it just, I don't want to like crash my system, operating system in a sense, right? I understand that it's kind of delicate for me. Lately though, like the past several months, I've been doubting a little bit my strategy personally. Okay. Where, I've been thinking, okay, I have this hunch that if I'm in the right environment, that I could do more with business than I have done in the past. And like one of the things is I still run my software company. It's a small kind of gig right now with a few people, but I spend like an hour or two a week on it. But I've had this nagging thing in the back of my brain where I'm like, if I could like approach it in a way where I'm a bit more ambitious with my business, and I just have higher turnover. I actually hire and fire people more and find the right people. Like I just have this nagging thing in the back of my brain where it's like, I think like business, like I've always had this hunch that like with business, I could see things like and do things very just in an interesting way. And so I've just been thinking about that a lot lately, where it's more of this responsibility thing where it's like, yeah, I wish I could just kick back and not do much. But then like the example of Elon Musk actually drives some guilt in my brain in the sense where I'm like, oh man, if he's doing this,
I was just going to ask.
It's not so much I want to be like him per se. Like I don't really have any of that per se. It's just more like he's not sitting back and he's kind of owning up to a responsibility for his position, resources, and his talents to do the most for mankind. Yeah. Whereas part of me is like, yeah, it's like I could do more,
Sure.
And, but we'll see. This is something obviously to be determined, but
yeah. Thank you for your honesty there. So I can relate with that massively. And so for me, it's like, so at the time I was at Tesla, my wife and I also owned a small business at the same time. So I was doing ungodly, crazy hours at Tesla, and I was running a small business, and the reason why I was doing it, a larger reason why was because, well, Elon's doing it. I shouldn't be just standing idle and not bringing value to the world and help the company move forward. And we're going to create a business to try and create wealth for ourselves and offer a great service for the community and everything. And then for me, what I realize is that it ran me to the freaking ground. It's something that becomes unsustainable. And I think each person has different levels of boundaries, I guess, when it comes to that. And not something that I'm working on personally now is I'm trying to figure out what that boundary is. I'm trying to figure out, okay, so what's the point where I can actually like have that balance, find that sort of that perfect thing where I feel confident in the fact that I'm bringing value, but I'm also not running myself into the ground, and then I think using Elon as an example for me, it's like has this ungodly ability to just, and I honestly think, and I think you did a video about this, or I forget who did a video about this. I think the fact that he's on the spectrum, I think that's his superpower. It's that hyper focus that really allows him to achieve so much. So for me, it's like, I'm really trying really hard to bring a lot of value to the world, but at the same time, I just know that at a certain point, I'm just going to crash and burn. And the last thing I want to do is do that. And then that takes my time away from my wife, that takes time away from family and friends. And there's so many things to learn there, just live, just to give you a little bit of what's going on in my head right now.
It's
sure. Like,
definitely,
I can connect with that a lot. So thank you very much for being open there. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've achieved happiness, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, actually, that's been a big kind of thing from early on in my 20s. I just had this sense that I needed to figure it out, that I needed to kind of find my own way, because I had the sense that like people around me, and like I just felt like they were just kind of chasing things because other people were doing it, and responsibilities, obligations, and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, no, I need to set up things in my life where I'm happy and I'm doing things that are meaningful, that I won't have any regrets later on, in life. And so, yeah, part of, in my 20s, like it was kind of a natural thing, but I kind of came to this conviction, this decision that, I kind of stepped back and say, okay, what's kind of the most important things in life that I should be doing? And, or in other words, how will I not have regret later on in life too, right? And there are several things that came up, but one was like, okay, just the type of person I am. And I'm like, if I'm like a jerk and just a selfish, greedy, whatever, just thinking just about myself, I don't think that's going to be the greatest place to be at. I don't think I'll be like happy with myself later on. So that was like one thing. I'm like, even if I don't do anything with my life, I'm going to be a person who actually cares about people. And my hack was, I'm like, even the so-called like the poorest of the poor, or the most unforgotten, or the least so-called, recognized people, that I should actually have some concern. That should bother me. And if it doesn't bother me, I'm not concerned. If I don't have that type of empathy and compassion, then I'm like, that's going to be a F for me. My whole life will be an F.
Sure.
That's what I kind of concluded. And so that was kind of one thing very, very high up there. Another thing very high up there was, I concluded, like, if I'm doing everything for myself, later on, I don't think I'll be happy, I think I'll be much more happier without regret if my priority was others above myself, and the thing is, it's not so much kind of like this moral thing. It's not a moral thing. It just makes sense to me. It's like, sure, if I'm just like all self-centered and focused on myself in my 70s or 80s, I don't think I'll be that happy, versus I live my life, kind of fine. You take care of yourself to a certain, manner, but you prioritize kind of your impact for others. And so that was kind of a second area where it's like, the things that I do, and that's the thing, ever since like my early 20s, I made that decision. I said, like, everything I've kind of done has been with those priorities. And so even business is kind of like, it's not, my top priority isn't per se to make money for myself and do X, Y, and Z so I could, live better / whatever. Yeah. My top priority is like, this has potential to create resources to do good with, right? And it's always been kind of like the main factor. And the other thing is with happiness is, I'm like, I think it's in relationships, not per se the tasks I'm doing per se. And this is back in my 20s again, where I'm like, if I'm going to be successful in anything, I'd rather choose relationships over career accomplishments. Wow. And so, as I said, I'm going to just build relationships and prioritize them to the point where it's like, if I'm terrible at, I'm letting people down, I'm like breaking, people's hearts, or my, loved ones' hearts, etc., and all this stuff. And then it's like, I'm not going to be very happy. That's, it's not going to be like a great place to be in when I'm older, 80 years old. But if I had, a great kind of, I would say I'm taking care of, right, the relationships in my life, and really just knocking it out of the ballpark in that area. Then in my 80s, I'll be like, imagine, like, you'll be like, it's been fantastic, your life, in a sense. And so made up my mind, and that shaped a lot of my decisions too, where, I've made a lot of decisions where it's like, I've sacrificed business opportunities or business expansion or time commitments or appointments and all sorts of things, because I'm like, I think this is not going to be helpful for relationships or with my wife or family, et cetera. And, typically, that kind of usually might handicap my kind of career accomplishments, whatever. But the crazy thing is, I think there's certain things with business and investing, they're kind of like hacks, where, if you make the right investing decision, it could like make up for, like your lack of time, or your lack of, like, typically you would think like, you need to put 16 hours a day on something, for years and years for it to pay off. Right. Yeah. But there's sometimes like a different approach. I think that, maybe it's partly luck, but it's just, if you can find something that, has a different way. Like, for example, the business we started in 2008 was in the App Store. We created an app, but we did it right at the time when the App Store was just launching, just like a month or two after. And it was like amazing. It just like, it was the momentum, the energy was all there. The opportunity was all there at that time, where, it didn't have to be something that we labored over, like 24/7 over. Yeah. Even though we did put in a decent amount of work to get it up and running, but it's never been something that, we've put an obscene amount of time and energy. But then again, like, you could say, on the flip side, you could say that's opportunity lost. Maybe I could have done more, over the years. But then it goes back to some of my decisions back in my 20s, choosing what will make me happy.
Right.
Like, what is success? Right. That's like something I thought about like constantly in my 20s. Like, what is success for me? How am I going to define it?
Wow.
Because I caught on. I'm like, people define it for you already. Like the whole like culture and society defines success already.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a counter definition, then you're just by default accepting everyone else's definition of success, whether or not that's healthy or good or right or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, I had this big kind of dilemma or decision. I'm like, what is my definition of success? And I've chosen to follow that over the years, and I don't have any regrets right now.
Sure.
But we'll see. Yeah, I'm always open to change.
Right.
We'll see.
Wow. So it seems like you really spent a lot of time, especially early on, thinking about these existential almost things about yourself as a person, and tremendous amount of wisdom. And I mean, does that go back to the time you spent traveling and seeing the world? Is that a direct correlation between seeing all those things, or was that always part of your thought process? Was that something you always thought about?
Yeah. I think it's been kind of something, even when I was like a teenager. I've always thought about kind of these deeper questions. It's always bothered me, some of the things happening around the world with like just some of the unfairness in some ways, or the things that happen that are unjust, and just so it's like our world is so crazy. Like if our world is just our neighborhood and our work, family life, then it's a sane world. Mm-hmm. But if our world includes, the billions of people living on the fringe and the edge, right? Then our world is crazy. This is literally an insane, crazy world we live in.
Yeah.
And for some reason that bothered me, like really early on, even in high school. And I've always wanted to play a role in that. And then, I think traveling's helped, reading has helped. And just kind of having a sense that people generally, like, just because they think they're right, aren't right necessarily. Mm-hmm, just because society says they're right doesn't mean that that's right. Kind of having this kind of maybe healthy level of skepticism and doubt of authority, and and saying that I need to find my own conviction, my own path, in a sense. All of that probably has helped over the years.
Wow. You're a very deep person. You're a very deep person. You've given a lot of thought to this, man. It's an inspiration, honestly. That's awesome. Wow. I want to switch gears real quick back to one of the comments you made earlier about what we're talking about, sort of some of the things that are going on with inflation and everything like that right now. Do you think inflation is a legitimate fear in the coming years? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I look at it's less of inflation as a problem. I look at right now, so much of the economy is resting or relying or trusting on the Fed monetary policy, on the government coming to rescue the economy. It's almost like the government and the Fed has put, and central banks around the world have put this like option call put on the market, where they're not letting the market go down naturally too far. They'll always backstop it, right? They've learned in the past that they can do it. They've been successful. They like it, and it sets up this interesting thing for the future of that's all great and dandy as long as it works, as long as there's trust in the system and in the Fed and government, central banks, et cetera. But once that trust starts to wade and you no longer trust the central bank's ability to keep things under tapped, to keep things under control, let's say with inflation and et cetera, debt and other things, then what happens is that seed of doubt can quickly spiral to like fear, and there's a lot of stuff. Like that's the thing, the human condition, it can go from exuberance to fear very fast.
Sure.
You just need the seed of doubt and of crazy consequence of doom and destruction, right?
Sure.
All sorts, just a nightmare scenario, and like it triggers this crazy amount of fear.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. Something I'm thinking about more is just what happens when we lose trust in central banks and the government to prop up things. What if debt gets out of hand, where it's like, yeah, more and more countries have trouble paying it back. Yeah. And what if people don't trust that the Fed can keep things under control? Yeah. Then it's like it becomes, the system becomes weaker, and as a result, yeah, there could be a period in a time of massive instability. But I need to weigh this against other scenarios, other things. And one of the biggest kind of trends or scenarios of this decade is technology is just kind of more exponentially growing in a lot of ways. See, what AI is doing is, in a way, it's fulfilling the potential of technology. Whereas, in 20, 30 years ago, we thought technology would do everything for us, but we come here and like, yeah, we can order a lot of stuff, Amazon, and we could browse our Facebook or Twitter feeds, et cetera. We could do a lot of stuff, watch movies, but it's not like, per se, like making us our pizza for dinner, or it's not like, I don't know, it's not doing everything.
Yeah. It's not freeing us up to be humans, basically.
Exactly. The Jetson dream isn't, here per se.
Right.
But AI is the thing, I think, that takes us to a place where it's just beyond our expectations of what it could do, especially at a certain point after it reaches, certain levels of competence. Yeah. But when that happens, what you have this massive amount of economic value that's generated, because each robot can create economic value. Like, think about it. A robot can go out and can find stuff, mine minerals, can grow a crop, can water things, can build something, can, a group of robots can construct a factory, can build, like, if you take this logically far enough out, they can do basically almost anything and everything, and they can create massive amounts of value. So where is that value going to go? It should go back into society somehow. And if governments aren't inept, it should be, in a way used to promote opportunity, but also to ensure that, society is going in the right direction. Yeah. If that happens, then we are actually in a momentously bullish time in history. Right. And to pick the right companies and to be invested is a great opportunity that I think you shouldn't be too worried about the negative ramifications, negative possible scenarios, because those scenarios are always going to be there, and the situation always changes in the future too. Maybe there'll be, some solutions or some, things to help out or something. But the more dominant theme is this kind of onward march of technology and creating more economic value that's going to, be, I think, an amazing investment opportunity. So you don't want to, I think, be so scared that you miss out on that. But you do also want to be realistic that it's not 100% foolproof either. Yeah. Any investment has risks. So there are a certain level, a number of risks involved. But overall, I'm optimistic. I think we're going to be okay, but it's something definitely to watch out for.
Gotcha. And how much do you think Elon's attachment to that AI development is important to democratize that and it not end up in the hands of a few, and then we have this ever growing sort of division and sort of the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. How important do you think Elon is being part of that movement, or do you think it's something that is beyond him, or is it a larger scope?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think government does have an important role. I think Elon and Tesla will have an important role, as with other companies too. Mm-hmm. I'm glad Elon's involved with AI because before Tesla, you had Google and Facebook and some others, but OpenAI, et cetera. But those companies, in some ways, I don't want to be too critical, but I think there are a lot of companies that lack moral compass. Like they do things because they're a business, and they justify it because they're a business. And and they're trying to grow their business. And they think the purpose of the company is to maximize shareholder value. Like that's what you're taught in business school or something. And so that they believe it and that's what they're doing. But I don't know if that's the best paradigm to have when you're kind of stewarding the most powerful technology in the history of the world that can, have crazy ramifications. Yeah. I think you need something more than maximizing shareholder, profitability or whatever value. And I think that's what Elon brings. Elon brings this side where he's like, it's not really about shareholder value. That's another result, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is we've got to think about the human race as a whole. And we've got to think about whether or not our actions are actually pushing humanity forward for the good, not the bad. And for him, he's like, that should obviously be the company's first goal, first priority.
Sure.
What the heck? Maximizing shareholder value? What kind of soul? What kind of soul does a company have with that type of mantra as their priority? If you have no soul, you're just like, I don't know. It's just it's crazy. And so it's momentous if you can have a CEO in a company that actually cares, that actually has somewhat of a decent value system, to take care of AI and what's ahead. So massively bullish for humanity that we have Elon and Tesla in the fray of things, with AI. I'm massively bullish. I think they're going to their heads down, they're growing, they're just like executing like crazy. And another thing is they're profitable. So they're just sticking in all this cash. Like we don't realize it completely, but a lot of like Elon is he knows what he's doing. He's putting in, like he's building the most, I think, competent, perhaps the greatest AI company ever. He's not gonna broadcast it and say, X, Y, and Z, this is everything I'm doing. He broadcasted enough for AI Day, I think, for people to get the hint. But where else are all the billions of dollars going to go? Right? Sure, there's factories, but factories don't cost that much. It's like, battery development, sure, but they have so much leftover cash. It's going into attracting the top talent. It's going into making sure that the AI in Tesla has the best resources, all of the teams, and is just going as fast as they can, and give it time to compound, to grow. This thing is going to be unstoppable in a few years, I'm looking forward to the future, of what Tesla AI shows.
It feels very exciting. It really does feel like we're on the cusp of witnessing something insane, as long as they execute up to the potential. And, especially if FSD does turn out to be this a significant lifesaver and not the opposite, I think that's going to be humongous. One thing you touched on, talking about how Elon is a good soul. He has the humanity's best interest in mind. Do you think there do you think that's widely known? Like, or is it just like a Tesla circle thing? Because I've always thought about that as like Elon, there isn't really a lot of content about Elon and his humanity. Like I would love to know about his upbringing. Like he doesn't talk a lot about his dad, and I'm sure that's very private, but I'm sure a lot of things happened when he was younger that were that speak to him as a human and sort of will help, I think, others sort of build trust. Like, how do you think about that at all? Is that part of, I'm just curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple of factors is, one is, I don't think he likes to talk about certain parts of his past. I think it brings up, some hurt. The other thing is Elon is, his mode of operation is very engineering focused, problem solving focused. And that's what he's doing every day in meetings. And he's trying to solve the biggest bottlenecks, with Tesla and SpaceX. And so he's in meetings just solving problems, engineering, physics, fixing stuff. And I think a lot of this kind of the humanity side, where, for example, Elon has a tremendous amount of insight on humanity issues. Like, for example, he's got a lot of insight on the role of like humor and memes and what he does on Twitter. It's like, you think that he's just like, it's easy. That's not easy to do.
No,
That's
I tried.
Really,
it's not.
yeah, it's really hard to do what he's doing, you know, and at the level he's doing. And he understands certain things. Like the other thing is like, for example, he understands parts of the human experience that is so uncanny for like a tech kind of geek, like engineer, like Elon. For example, like the Model S and the Model 3 and Y, et cetera, like they're very, very, they're not overly techie cars.
Sure.
If you think about it. Like owning a Tesla is not an overly techie experience either.
Yep, I agree.
And a lot of that is Elon understands that while technology is the heart of it, it's like the experience needs to be also human too. And this is really underrated. Most tech people, programmers, software people, like all this stuff, like they are tremendously weak on the human type of experience side. but Elon has this super uncanny like knack for it, you know? And I don't even know where it comes from per se, because he doesn't even talk about it that much.
Right.
And he's not like, that's not his day to day where he's like having lengthy meetings on, you know, what kind of, you know, I don't know, human type of things to put into this, you know, into the experience.
Yeah.
It's things he just makes unilateral calls on a lot, you know, says, this is what I want or whatever. But like one example is Tesla doesn't change or they give the same price to everyone. There's no discounts to even celebrities, or they don't do product placement. They pay for, you know, stuff or whatever. It's like, why is that? That's so uncanny. It's so crazy to think about.
Yeah.
But for Elon, he's like, it's the human side. He's like, you know, what would people want? Like, how do people feel when you give these like hidden, you know, backdoor discounts, left and right to people, and you can't really trust what the price is going to be, et cetera. And Elon just has a sense. He's just like, no, that's not how we're doing it. You know, he understands like it's important to do certain things in the right way, but a tech geek doesn't. I don't know. It's just that's not their area. And I think, Elon is definitely underrated in that area. I just think maybe people haven't talked to him enough about it openly in interviews to bring it out enough. You know, like, and also like, for example, his whole kind of, I kind of say this, like, I think Elon is probably with AI, you know, in the future. He's put himself out there as like kind of trying to manage, take care of AI in a way where it doesn't have a negative, impact toward humanity. He's trying to make a positive impact. But that comes from his humanity side again. Like a tech person doesn't care about that much. You know, they just care about the technology. But why would Elon care so much about, you know, these other impacts? And again, part of it could be his experience growing up in different cultures too. Because a lot of times when you grow up just in one culture, one language, one way of life, you are boxed in. It's hard to think, you know, from completely different angles. But yeah, maybe growing up in South Africa, seeing, you know, apartheid there, seeing different cultures, languages, you know, being in the US, traveling, etc. He's maybe, and that's think about his whole perspective with China. Why is he catching something that's happening in China that most people aren't talking about? Like he's, you know, saying, hey, China is like going berserk. They're growing, they're executing. He's got a lot of respect for what's going on there. Most people, they can't get there, you know, because they're stuck evaluating China through some cultural lens. And if you look at the cultural political debate going on, it's like, you know, everyone's negative on China for everything, for all. And that's the thing. It's like people, they can't separate. They go, no, you can't just praise or respect their economy if the government is obviously not respecting human rights. And so it's a all or nothing thing for a lot of people. But there are, and I don't want to defend, you know, obviously China, their government, their human rights violations, et cetera. Like I can go on a lot of critique on it, but there are a lot of nuances with countries and cultures and ways countries, you know, pursue things. And it doesn't mean that if you respect a certain part of how they run their country, that you are justifying everything the country is doing, right?
Yeah.
I could say, hey, I think that having a 5 or 10 year plan that the government sticks to, regardless of political party, that focuses on economic opportunity and development is a smart move.
Yeah.
That X country is doing. That doesn't mean I support everything that country is doing, right? And I think Elon understands that. That's why he can respect and say some good things about China, because he understands there's nuances, and part of it is he thinks differently, more complex in his kind of analysis. But
that's brilliantly put, and that's one thing that I just wish there was more on his humanity. I just wish there was more. And again, I want to respect his privacy, and I'm sure there are things that maybe he just doesn't want to share. But I do feel like a lot of the interviews that he does, especially with mass media, it's always like, oh, how hard was Tesla to make? How did you come up with the idea? It just seems very narrow, and I just wish we saw that side of him, because I think it would really help us understand better how he approaches problems, and it might really give a lot more color, especially to the wider public, that this isn't just some psycho engineer guy that's just focused on technology. There's a lot of humanity behind him, I think that would be amazing if that day ever happens. That would be incredible. Yeah. Are you going to sit down and talk to him? Is that still a thing? Because I know people were. What's going on there?
Yeah, there's not much. I mean, I've asked IR Tesla Investor Relations if they could do something. They said they'll try, but there's limited things I could do on my end. I take it more as like, if opportunity presents, I'd love to talk with him. I want to get into more of the deeper things of when I look at things from like 50 or 100 years in the future. I think people are going to have questions about Elon that, I hope get answered now. But I mean, some of the things are like, it's how he sets up these companies and how he chooses the problems and goes about solving these problems and managing people in the teams to be catalyzed around solving certain issues and problems. These things, he has some insights, I think, that haven't come out fully.
I agree.
And I think that if they come out, you'll have future generations of entrepreneurs and leaders modeling a lot of, their business / solving problems and solving humanity scale problems like off of it. It's just, I don't think that has been fully like shared enough.
I agree.
I think a lot of people, I think the other thing is Elon actually, it's just kind of crazy is I think for most journalists / media outlets, he's still a relatively new figure in the sense that they don't really understand his thinking. They have the headlines about him, but even for most journalists, they'll be like, so why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Why are you going to Mars?
It's so surface,
Yeah. For the thousandth time, he has to say,
I stopped watching Elon interviews like with Mass. I'm like, oh my God, here we go again.
Yeah. But that's the state of, they're still trying to figure out the basics, right?
For sure.
So hopefully, hopefully soon, we'll see. It doesn't have to be me. I just want him to share more about, how he does what he does on a deeper kind of, angle.
Yeah. I do hope you get it. I mean, if that ever materializes, I'll be your first viewer. I'll be like on your comments, oh my God, it finally happened. It'd be amazing. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're coming to an end here. No worries. I just want to throw you one more question. What do you think is humanity's purpose? Like, why are we all here?
Yeah. So I think that, when I take a step back, it kind of, and again, this is, it's just how I think, but there's a lot of assumptions people make. And one of the assumptions I hear often from some circles is this assumption that, we are just kind of this accidental life form that's evolved over billions or trillions of years, right? And they assume that that's a fact. Like that's proof. It's proven that that's the case, right? On the flip side, you can have some others who will assume and argue that it's a fact that no, we've been created by some type of higher power or higher being or something, higher intelligence, etc. But they say it like it's a proven fact, right? The reality, when I look at this stuff, I'm like, to me, it's like, it's, I wouldn't say foolish, but it's just, I don't think we've come to the grips of our humanity, how little we really know. You know, do we really know that, yeah, we're, you know, just a product of just, you know, accidental, whatever, you know, atoms, you know, and for example, life coming out and life, not just coming out, but evolving to the place where there's consciousness and morality and these almost existential values of like beauty and love. And like some of these things, like it's really, really hard to explain in certain paradigms. And I think also another thing is people tend to, in our modern day kind of almost hyper scientific kind of focused world, we tend to look down upon the thousands of years of thousands of civilizations history and their kind of more mystical beliefs, you know, with spirituality or higher power, etc. But you know, for me, I kind of look at it with more of an open mind. I'm like, you know, it's like there's a lot of things that, you know, we've actually, I think, gone backward in some ways in modern society. Sometimes, like, you know, yeah, it's not all forward. You can make a case that, you know, people live more isolated lives now than ever, you know, in different ways. But anyways, like look at our health. Shouldn't our health be much better than it is now if, you know, technology is like, sure, we might live longer, but a lot of that could be more just like, you know, taking out, you know, or solving, I would say solving like surgery and different things. But in terms of like actual, like, I don't know, health, it seems like we've gone backwards in certain ways.
The quality of the health.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, look at mental illness today, right? And lots of different things. But I'm not going to judge completely modern or past and compare, et cetera. But all of that framework, you know, I just take a step back and I'm a little bit more humble in my approach, I think, than assuming that it's this or this or this or that. Yeah. And when I go into my own personal journey, I think that's a lot of it. What it comes down to is when there's such unknownness and kind of things aren't necessarily 100% clear or proven, you need to find your own way. Yeah. And you need to go with what resonates with you the most and, you know, what you kind of, can find conviction in. And personally, I found kind of a long journey over many, many decades of, yeah, I actually think there is a very, very complex and deep spiritual world out there that is just not very well understood. I actually think there's a lot that science doesn't comprehend yet. I think there's going to be an intersection eventually, more and more. I just think we're just in the super, super early innings. I think a lot of the more mystical kind of beliefs and thoughts of the past aren't necessarily naive per se. I think they were just early type of, you know, stabs and stuff. I think we're going to find out a lot more. I think like the whole idea of just consciousness, you know? Now this stuff is bigger than people think. Like even the quantum physics, like how can two atoms, like in two completely different places in the universe, actually have a relationship? Like there are things that I'm not one to, I'm not going to say I know what the future beholds or I know the ultimate reality, but yeah, in my own personal journey, I found just a lot of connection, deep personal connection with I think some very deeper meaning and deeper existence. And
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I'll tell you, like my wife has been talking about some of this, like she's discovering that in her own journey. And initially when I heard her talk about it, I'm like, oh, come on, like hey, blah, blah, blah. But then you really think about like life in general and just there's just so much we don't know. And I feel like it's going to take so much time for us to get there to really understand everything that's going on. And we may never find out what's actually going on. But it resonates with me that there is that other side of life that we just do not even think exists, but it does. And it's influenced us so much. Like I think part of my the extreme luck that I've had in my life, I think is associated to that in some way. And I have no idea why, but I'm sure it is, so.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like one of the things that blows me away is like when my first son was born, it's like he came out with full personality.
Whoa.
Like it was like, and that just threw me off because like, I'm like, he was like his personality today is the same.
Wow.
As when he just came out, that whole, of course, all of his, brain synapses connections and his abilities to reason and think and all this stuff wasn't there per se, but his whole personhood and his personality and his consciousness, his whole being was was completely there, developed. And that threw me off as a person who hasn't experienced like birth of a human being, I've experienced obviously like young kids before that, but just experiencing it at birth, I'm like, man, there's something going on.
Wow.
There's just like different things that you just experience in life. We're just like, yeah, there's something going on. Like there's like some experiences in nature too, where you have some experiences like at the ocean or like on top of a mountain or at some crazy river that you tap into something beyond like just what you're seeing. It's just, and maybe people haven't, but at least in my own personal journey, it's just undeniable stuff, Sometimes you might be listening to a piece of music, a song, and it takes you somewhere that is just like, it's just not explainable, There's just certain things that just like, they're kind of like almost windows into another reality that like portals in a sense that, and there's so many of them that it just makes me think that, the reality that we know is not the only, I think, objective reality. Yeah.
Blowing my mind. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you so much, man. I feel like, my God, we've been at it for almost 2 hours and it flew by. I just really appreciate how kind you are with your time. And, thank you so much for the honesty, going so in depth in so many different topics. I feel like a lot of these things we could have spent the entire time talking about one specific thing, But I just want to again thank you so much for spending the time with me. I can say that I've learned a lot. I'm going to rewatch this thing 40 times just so I can take every single little bit of insight you gave us here. But I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Awesome. Fun conversation. I love talking about this stuff. I want to wish your channel the best. I think you're putting out some good stuff, good content, and excited to see where it heads. And willing to help out. And we're in this all together. So
awesome. Really appreciate that, Dave. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Well, we'll see you on the next one, guys. Thank you so much for stopping in. And Dave, thank you so much again. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right.